What up, everybody? It's your local Ottawa fan. I'm here to talk about the inaugural game of the inaugural season for PWHL Ottawa. Before we actually get into the nitty gritty of the game, I want to talk about just the atmosphere leading up to and during the game. I can remember about a week before the game, there were already articles coming out saying that it was going to be the most attended professional women's hockey game in North America. By the time the game happened, it was the most attended professional women's hockey game, period. That's it, which it's really good for the sport. The fact that, game one had that level of atmosphere, fans that were really into it as well. These weren't just, people who were going because it was something to do. You could tell that these were fans who already really cared about this team, really wanted to see this team and this league succeed. I know I got season tickets as soon as I could, and I could tell that there were a lot of other people. They had these hats for people who'd, you know, put the payments in advance, and I would say it felt like at least half the crowd had a hat like this. You could tell that this is a fan base that's already going to be dedicated, and it looks like this league is set up for long-term success. Anybody who's watched women's hockey before knows how exciting it is, how fun it is, and honestly, I think the worst thing about women's hockey was that you had about Canada and the US, and that was it for really, really interesting games. Other than that, it was a lot of waiting for just one clear, distinct, consolidated league that was the top of the top, the best players in the world, without it just being international tournaments that would be, maybe 2 weeks long. So it's a real breath of fresh air to actually have a league like this. You know, a full season, not just Canadians playing for Canada, Americans playing for America, but an actual draft. I know another issue is sometimes there would just be teams that would have players who would play for their hometown city. This isn't that. This is a professional women's hockey league, as the name implies. And it feels like a new chapter for women's hockey. It really did. At that game, you got the sense that this was the start of something long term. This was the start of something that was going to last. And on the other hand, this is also a breath of fresh air for Ottawa sports. As I'm sure you can see, I'm a pretty big Ottawa sports fan. I'm specifically a fan of the Ottawa Senators and the Ottawa Red Blacks. And anybody who's followed either of those two teams knows that things have not gone well for them recently. They both are in the middle of a really long playoff drought. 2017 is the last time the Ottawa Senators made the playoffs. 2018 is the last time the Ottawa Red Blacks made the playoffs. And PWHL Ottawa looks like a team that doesn't just want to make the playoffs, doesn't just want to win a round, but wants to win it all. I can remember I saw on Twitter they were throwing the word championship around before the season started. Teams that hope they might maybe make the playoffs don't throw the word championship around that early on. So this is clearly a team that has high expectations for themselves, high expectations for what they're going to do this season and next season and so on. And the city of Ottawa, I think, not only needs this because this is a team that, is new, and we don't get that often. We get a lot of teams that, oh, sure, they're new, but they're surrounded by two massive fan bases that have been around for 100 years. And, whenever there's a Leafs game, half the crowd is cheering for the Leafs, even if it's played in Ottawa. We played Montreal, and I think there was one Montreal fan. It was an overwhelming majority of Ottawa fans. And I think that this is a very, very good thing, because if this team does do well early on, deep playoff runs, winning championships, a consistent history of winning, then when this league expands, there's a good chance that there will be people in other cities who eventually get a team expanded who are Ottawa fans, who have become devoted to the team in Ottawa. And I know that Ottawa's normally on the other end of that. They're on the end of, we've got this new team, but somebody's been a Leaf fan because their dad was a Leaf fan because their granddad was a Leaf fan, or they're a Habs fan because their dad and their granddad, and so on and so forth. Oh, my mom's a Bruins fan and her mom's a Bruins fan, so guess what? I'm a Bruins fan. But now the shoe's on the other foot. Now it might be, well, I've always been an Ottawa fan, so I don't care that they've expanded into my city of Chicago or Detroit or Pittsburgh. I'm an Ottawa fan. And it's really nice that this city's been given a chance by being one of the first teams, because you could tell how electric the atmosphere was, how dedicated this city is going to be to this team, and you got the sense how dedicated this team will be to this city. It really does feel like this is going to be one of the most rabid fan bases, and it's nice. It's really nice to have that. The other thing is, the historic number of people that showed up is a number that will likely be broken by other teams, and hopefully by us as well. And I think that's the other thing that just really added to the atmosphere, that this felt like the first step. That yes, the inaugural game for PWHL Ottawa did break the record as the most attended professional women's hockey game. But there's the sense that this record isn't going to last long. It might not last for a full week. And that is wonderful. That's so good for the sport. And I hope whatever city takes the record from us, we take it right back. And then they take it from us, and we take it right back. I could just... The vibes were off the chart. I heard so many people just around town, people that I knew saying, oh, I wish I could go to the home opener. Oh, I wish I could go to the game, but it was sold out. Like, people want to go. The no one cares about women's hockey crowd, dead silent. Sold out crowd, hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube. Millions of people are tuning in to watch it on TV. Millions. People care about women's hockey. And now that there is a professional women's hockey league, people will go to the games. People will sell out stadiums. It's finally here. Now to actually get into the game, the first period was really good for Ottawa. Honestly, I felt like Ottawa outplayed Montreal. I felt we outplayed them by a lot. The shots were 10-4. And at the end of the day, Anne-Renée Desbiens, the Montreal goaltender, lights out. And she was lights out all game. She was amazing. She was 26 for 28. I mean, it sucks to get goalied in your first game, but it did feel like Ottawa got goalied, because it's not even like those 28 shots were weak shots. They were very high chance, lots of opportunities in front of the net, and those 28 shots don't account for all the times that there was almost a shot that things were wide open and, a defender got in the way, or, things just, didn't go that way. They didn't get the bounce. But I would say for majority of the game, it felt like Ottawa was the better team, and that eventually paid off, because in the second period, Michaela Grant-Mente, for the first time in PWHL Ottawa history, scores a goal. And then you see the review, and the puck definitely went under the net, and it gets called back, and the roof exploded when they scored, and then there was kind of this, oh. When you saw the review, you were like, oh yeah, when we saw that replay, we just knew this is not going to stand. There's sometimes where there's a review and a goal gets called back, and you're like, what? No. Everybody in the crowd saw on the replay, oh yeah, this one's getting called back. So first goal in PWHL Ottawa history, and it doesn't count. Doesn't matter. They get a power play. Hayley Sakamura, for the first time ever, for the second time ever, scores a goal for PWHL Ottawa, and this one stands 1-0 Ottawa, and the place went crazy. TD Place was absolutely rocking all game. The entire game was an electric energy, and when they finally scored a goal, and we knew it counted for sure, it was awesome. But it didn't last. It didn't even last, super, super long, because Montreal came right back, and I think that's one thing that I really have to credit Montreal. They were very aggressive, and they never surrendered and never gave up. And especially in the third period, which I'll get into, but even in the second and in the first, they always felt like they were in it, even when Ottawa was getting more chances, getting more shots, and it felt like the time on attack was really in favor of Ottawa. Montreal stayed in it. They were down by one. They weren't down by two or three. They stayed in it. They were aggressive. Some would maybe say too aggressive because Montreal did get 6 penalties. Ottawa only converted once. They got a lot of great chances, a lot of good shots. Only 1 goal on 6 penalties, including a few small 5-on-3. It was very, very brief, but nonetheless, 5-on-3 is 5-on-3. 1 goal on 6 penalties. An aggressive team, but ultimately it did work out for them. Montreal did end up winning in overtime. And part of that was Claire Dalton got the first goal for PWHL Montreal, tying the game at 1 apiece. And that is where things stood going into the second intermission. And third period started, and a lot of tension. You could kind of feel, all right, let's get this going. And again, we get another goal. Katerina Mrazova, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing any of the names. I'm sure I am, but as the season goes on, believe me, I'll be pronouncing all these names correctly. I'll learn about all the players, that's for sure. But second goal, Ottawa is up again, and I mean, the vibes. I think that's the only way I can say it. It wasn't just momentum, because if I'm actually being honest, in the third period, it felt like the momentum was in Montreal's favor. They had a very aggressive pushback, and the third period is where they didn't just not die, they started to really fight back. Even after they would tie the game with a goal by Laura Stacey, even after they tied the game, it felt like there was a lot of pushback. They were really coming for it. But the vibes after Ottawa scored to go up 2-1, it was like, oh man, like, can we ever lose? They did, but hey, they got an OT loss. They got a point. I can think of another certain Ottawa hockey team that, when they lose, they just lose. But ultimately, it does go to overtime, where Anne-Sophie Betez scores the OT winner for Montreal. I felt like, because it came off of a takeaway, and I felt like there should have been somebody a bit more available for a pass for Ottawa. It felt like there just wasn't an availability, and Sophie Betez was very aggressive, and I think that was the key to victory for Montreal. They were aggressive. They really played the puck. Yes, it led to penalties, but they didn't let Ottawa breathe. And I think that ultimately is a good thing, because I get the sense that Ottawa is a team that you can't give space. You give them space, they will burn you on it. The few times Ottawa was given space, they either they scored or they came really damn close to scoring. And I think that Montreal had a very good strategy of keeping, a lot of the game was at the boards, a lot of hitting, and that's another thing I want to touch on. This is already starting to feel like, okay, there could be a rivalry here. When Montreal came out, started the game, and at each intermission, there was a lot of cheering. Yes, of course, we want Ottawa to win, but we also are here for a historic night. We were here to cheer both teams, to cheer the league. This was a celebration of women's hockey in a lot of ways. So to just be actively, booing your opponents right off the gate, I don't know, it didn't feel right. But you could tell as the game went on, like as the third period was starting and they were reintroducing Montreal, there were a bit more boos than at the start of the game. There were a few hits that, you could tell players took exception to. It wasn't like too much, but this is also game one. So, I'm hoping that this leads to a rivalry. I think that, the next step to making a league have long-term success is, as weird as it says, bad blood. I want to hate Montreal. I want to hate their fans, hate the team, want nothing more than to see them fail. Because, if you just kind of don't care, I like all the teams, well, then why do you care? I really feel like this could be a rivalry. I feel like, was there a lot of love lost between the two teams? I don't think so, but was there a little bit of love lost? Maybe a bit. And maybe as the season goes on, as playoff implications become more clear, as, maybe these two teams are fighting for first in the division, first in the league. That's home ice advantage through the playoffs. Maybe the game will get more chippy. And it was a chippy game, which, first off, I think for Ottawa, that's great. Ottawa has a long history of chippy hockey teams. I think that really just suits the city. We retired Chris Neal's jersey. We like chippy blue collar players, and this feels like a team that is not gonna lie down, that is gonna play aggressive. Which brings me to one other point that I want to bring up, which was the play of Emmerance Maskmeyer. I don't think it was her best game. She was 21 of 24, .875 save percentage, not the best. But she had flashes of brilliance. And, this is game one. I really feel like she's going to be great. I feel like she's the certified starter. Montreal has a lot of star power on their team, too. So, you do have to give credit where credit is due. Like, if I faced 24 shots against from that team, the score would have been 24-2. Probably 25, actually. Knowing me, I probably would have just been out of position, and they wouldn't have even shot it. It would have ended up in my net somehow. So, she did make a bunch of great saves, and also was very heads up. Even where it was, not really a shot, but the puck was kind of floating, she had the heads up, I'll grab it. Don't let this become a chance. If it's kind of floating in the air, grab it. Force the face-off. It's better to have that than to let this lead to a chance. And that's the kind of heads-up play that you want in a goaltender. You could tell that, she tends the goal. That's her job. That's what she does. And that's what you want. You don't want a goaltender who's, too concerned with the other aspects of the game. Yes, it's nice if they can have breakout passes or set up plays. But if it's at the cost of tending the goal, you will get burned. And no time was it more evident that, Emmerance is the real deal than when a penalty shot was called for Marie-Philippe Poulin. When that happened, I think just about everybody held their breath in that stadium. And I believe at the time it was tied 0-0. And the greatest women's hockey player in the history of the sport was given a penalty shot. The opportunity to score the first goal for her team, the first goal by a Canadian team, which, by the way, Ottawa has that. That's a feather in the cap for sure. Emmerance was up to the task. When Marie-Philippe Poulin is given a penalty shot, saving that is no easy task. Emmerance was up to the task. And I think Montreal's goaltender, I really want to say, Anne-Renée Desbiens played amazing. It was one of the most expertly crafted goaltending performances I've seen in either league. She was exceptional. She truly was. Her defense definitely helped her out, but she also had 6 penalties that needed to be killed, and I would say at least 3 or 4 of them generated a lot of very dangerous chances. Yes, one of them led to a goal, but there were a lot of dangerous chances. And I think that both goaltenders played well. I do think in this game, Desbiens did play a little bit better, but I got a lot of hope. And I got this sense that, okay, we got a goaltender. Ottawa has a goaltender that, is going to be good. It's going to do well. And defensively, they were an aggressive team. They actually had this amazing thing called defensive structure, which, in Ottawa, that's a term that I'm not quite used to, and I'm still getting used to it, but defensive structure is going to have to be in the vocabulary of Ottawa hockey fans. I think that's about it. I'm going to try to talk about the other games throughout the season, and about what our expectations for the team is. I think that's the one thing. The expectations right now seem to be for them to make a push for the championship. But also, it's game one. You never know. Maybe things go a little worse, and now we just kind of want to make the playoffs. Maybe they go better. Now it's championship or bust. Like, we aren't kind of hoping. We're like, oh yeah, this is ours to lose. At the end of the day, they didn't win. They got a point. Playoffs, on the table. After all 6 teams have played their first game, Ottawa was 4th in the league. That's playoff position. And it felt like this is a game that Ottawa, if you played this game 10 more times, Ottawa probably wins 7 or 8 times. I do feel like if we face Montreal in a playoff series, we would win. I know that's a bold statement after one game, but this felt like, yes, Montreal won the game, but in terms of power rankings, I wouldn't be surprised if Ottawa's being ranked as number 1 despite the loss because of how aggressive they were. And it makes me think that, as the season goes on, Ottawa will be able to beat other teams a lot easier than, say, Montreal. Montreal might have a bit more problems with Boston or New York or Toronto. And that's not to say Ottawa won't. It's not to say that those aren't good teams. But I do get the sense that Ottawa has a very, very good chance at, stringing a lot of wins in a row together. So I'm looking really forward to the game against Boston, to game 2, the first ever away game. And I think that's about it. So go Ottawa, go.